The train pulled into Bitterroot Station as winter dusk bled the last light from the Montana sky. Clara pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, watching the platform emerge through veils of steam and snow. The cold had teeth here. She could feel it even through the glass, even through the wool of her traveling coat, even through the layers of lies she had wrapped around herself like armor. She was not who the letter said she was, not anymore. The other passengers shuffled past her in the narrow aisle, eager to escape the cramped car, eager for whatever warmth awaited them in this frozen edge of the world. Clara remained seated. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together to keep them still, to keep them from remembering. Outside, a man stood alone on the platform, tall, broad-shouldered beneath a heavy coat. His face was shadowed by the brim of his hat, but she knew him from the single photograph he had sent. Caleb Mercer, the widower, the man who had written to her under a false name, offering her something she had stopped believing existed, a second chance. She stood finally gathering her carpet bag and medical case. The weight of the latter made her pause. She had debated leaving it behind in Philadelphia, debated throwing it into the Schuylkill River, along with everything else she wanted to forget. But a doctor's daughter never traveled without her instruments, and a nurse, even a disgraced one, could not abandon the tools of mercy, even if mercy had become her crime. The platform boards creaked under her boots. Snow had begun to fall in earnest, now fat flakes that caught in her eyelashes and melted on her lips. The man stepped forward. Up close she could see his face properly, weathered, handsome in the way of men who worked with their hands. Eyes the color of winter storms assessing her with an intensity that made her want to turn back toward the train. "Miss Ashford," he said, not a question. "Mr. Hart," she replied, using the name from his letters. "Or should I call you Mr. Mercer now?" Something flickered across his expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition that they were both playing parts in a performance neither had fully rehearsed. "Cal," he said simply, "no point in pretense between us. Not when we're about to become partners in a lie that would scandalize this entire territory." She studied him, searched for signs of the grief he had written about the desperate need for answers that had driven him to place advertisements in Eastern newspapers seeking someone with her particular qualifications, medical knowledge, discretion, a willingness to disappear. "The station master is watching," Cal said quietly. "We should go. There's much to discuss and little time before word spreads that Kate Mercer has returned from the dead." The name struck her like a physical blow. Kate, the woman whose identity she had agreed to assume, the woman who had died 18 months ago in a fall from a cliff, leaving behind a husband, a daughter, and questions that haunted the spaces between Cal's carefully worded letters. She followed him to a wagon, the horse stamped in the cold breath, steaming in the lamplight. Cal helped her up with impersonal courtesy, his hand firm beneath her elbow, then swung up beside her. The wagon lurched forward, and Bitterroot Station fell away behind them. They rode in silence through the gathering dark. The town proper lasted only 6 blocks. General store, saloon, doctor's office with a painted shingle swinging in the wind, a church with a bell tower that pierced the sky like an accusation. Then they were past it all, following a road that wound into forest where pine trees stood like sentinels, and the only sound was the crunch of wheels through fresh snow. "You understand what I'm asking of you," Cal said finally. His voice was low, meant only for her, though there was no one for miles to overhear. "You explained it in your letters," Clara said. "You want me to pretend to be your wife, to convince the town that Kate Mercer survived her fall, suffered memory loss, and has now returned. You want me to live in her house, wear her clothes, care for her daughter, and in return you'll give me what I need most." "Anonymity," Cal finished. "A new name, a new life, $500 when the year is done enough to start over anywhere you choose." He paused. "But there's more to it than that. I wasn't entirely honest in my letters." Clara's hands tightened on her bag. "What did you leave out? The real reason I need you." Cal's jaw worked as he chose his words. "Kate didn't just fall. She was pushed. Someone in Bitterroot killed my wife, and I intend to find out who. But I can't do it alone. The town closed ranks after her death. Questions went unanswered. Evidence disappeared. The sheriff ruled it an accident within 3 days before the coroner had even finished his examination. And you think bringing back a false Kate will somehow expose the truth? I think a dead woman returning will make someone very nervous, Cal said. Nervous enough to make a mistake. Nervous enough to reveal what they're hiding. He glanced at her. You have medical training. You know how to observe, how to ask questions that sound innocent but cut to bone. And you need to disappear as badly as I need answers. That makes us perfect partners. The wagon crested a rise, and Clara saw the house. It sat in a clearing carved from the forest, 2 stories of dark timber, with windows that reflected the last purple light of dusk. Smoke rose from the chimney, a sign of life that somehow made the structure feel more desolate rather than less. This was a place meant for a family. Now it housed only ghosts. One more thing, Cal said, as he drew the wagon to a halt. My daughter Iris. She hasn't spoken since Kate died. The doctor says there's nothing physically wrong with her. The trauma took her voice. She communicates through writing and drawing, but her pictures are disturbed, dark. She saw something the night her mother died, but she won't tell me what. Can't tell me or won't. I need you to help her remember. Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. A child who had witnessed violence. A child locked in silence. She knew what that kind of trauma could do to a young mind, how it could calcify into permanent damage if not treated with care. How old is she? 9? Nearly 10 now. Cal climbed down from the wagon, then turned to help her. She's inside with Mrs. Chen, the woman who runs the general store. Chen agreed to watch her while I collected you from the station. She's the only person in town who knows the truth about you, and she'll keep it secret. She has her own reasons to mistrust the local authorities. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood silhouetted against lamplight, her features sharp and assessing. She was older than Clara by perhaps 15 years, dressed in practical wool, with her black hair pinned severely back. Chinese, which explained Cal's comment about mistrusting authorities. The territories were not kind to those deemed outsiders. You found her, Mrs. Chen said. Her English carried the crisp precision of British missionary education. She looks nothing like Kate. This will never work. It has to work, Cal said. Mrs. Chen stepped aside to let them enter. The interior was warm, heated by a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. The furnishings were simple but well made. A table, chairs, shelves lined with books. Everything clean and organized with the precision of a man trying to maintain order in a life that had fallen to chaos. And in the corner, watching them with eyes too old for her face, sat a girl. Iris Mercer was small for 9, all sharp angles and pale skin. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she wore a nightgown despite the early hour. She held a piece of slate and a nub of chalk, and she was staring at Clara with an expression that made Clara's breath catch. Not fear, not curiosity, recognition, as if Iris saw something in Clara that Clara herself had tried to bury. Iris, Cal said gently, this is Clara. She's going to be staying with us for a while. The girl's chalk moved across the slate. When she held it up, Clara read the words scrawled in a child's uneven hand. She has sad eyes, like Mama. Mrs. Chen inhaled sharply. Cal's expression closed like a door slamming shut. But Clara moved forward, crossing the room until she stood before the girl. She knelt so their eyes were level. Yes, Clara said quietly. I suppose I do. Iris studied her, then wrote again. Are you a ghost? No, I'm very much alive. The chalk hesitated, then moved once more. Mama was sad before she became a ghost. Are you going to die too? The question hung in the air like smoke. Clara felt the weight of it, the terrible clarity of a child who had learned too young that sadness could be fatal. Not if I can help it, Clara said. Mrs. Chen made a soft sound of distress. I should go. My store will be missed if I'm gone too long. She looked at Cal. You know what you're doing is dangerous. If the wrong people discover the truth, they won't, Cal said. They will. Mrs. Chen pulled on her coat. Lies always surface eventually, and when they do, the cost is always higher than the liar imagined. She moved to the door, then paused. Miss Ashford, or whatever name you choose to use now, a word of advice. This house remembers. The walls have soaked in 18 months of grief and rage. Don't let it soak into you as well. Then she was gone, leaving Clara alone with Cal and the silent child, and the weight of a deception that felt heavier with every passing moment. Cal showed her through the house. Each room was a museum dedicated to the woman she was meant to become. Kate's clothes still hung in the wardrobe. Kate's hairbrush still rested on the vanity dark strands caught in its bristles. Kate's books lined the shelves, their spines cracked from reading. Kate's shawl draped over a chair. Kate's teacup sat unwashed beside the kitchen basin, a ring of dried coffee staining its interior. "You'll sleep in the main bedroom," Cal said. "I've moved to the smaller room upstairs. Iris is across the hall from you. If she has nightmares, which she does most nights, you'll need to go to her." Clara ran her fingers along the edge of the vanity. "Why did you keep everything exactly as it was?" "At first because I couldn't bear to change it." Touching her things felt like acknowledging she was really gone. Cal's voice was flat, carefully emptied of emotion. "Later I kept it because I realized it might be useful. If you're going to convince people you're Kate, you need to know how she lived, what she wore, what she read, how she moved through these rooms." Clara opened the wardrobe. Dresses in dark colors, practical skirts and blouses. One good dress in deep blue silk, likely kept for church or rare social occasions. And at the back, wrapped in muslin, a wedding dress. She closed the wardrobe quickly. "There are things you need to know about Kate," Cal said. "Things I didn't put in the letters because they couldn't be trusted to paper. Tell me." He crossed to a drawer, pulled out a leather journal, and handed it to her. This was Kate's diary. She kept it faithfully for years, but the last 3 months before her death, those pages were torn out. Someone removed them, and I don't know who or why. Clara opened the journal. The entries were written in a neat, controlled hand. They spoke of daily life, garden plantings, Iris's progress with her studies, the weather, but nothing personal, nothing that revealed the interior landscape of the woman who had written them. She was careful, Clara observed, even in her private writings. Kate was always careful. Cal's expression was unreadable. "She came to Bitterroot 7 years ago, answering an advertisement I'd placed for a school teacher. We married within 3 months. It seemed practical. I needed help with the mining claim and someone to manage the household. She needed security and a place where her past wouldn't matter. Her past, she never spoke of it, said only that she'd left Philadelphia after a family tragedy and wanted to start fresh." Cal paused. "I didn't press. Everyone who comes west is running from something. I thought her secrets were her own business." Philadelphia. The word landed like a stone in Clara's chest. Kate had been from Philadelphia, the same city Clara had fled 3 months ago after the accusations began, after the patient's family had demanded her arrest, after the hospital board had stripped her of her position, and the newspapers had printed her name beside words like murderess and angel of death. "Did she have family there?" Clara asked carefully. "A brother," she said once, "but she never wrote to him, and no one ever came looking for her." Cal retrieved the journal. "There's something else. Kate was sick. She hid it well, but in the months before her death, I noticed she was losing weight, coughing at night. She claimed it was just a persistent cold, but I think it was more serious." Consumption. The word formed in Clara's mind unbidden. The wasting disease. She had seen it often enough in Philadelphia, had watched patients deteriorate over months and years, drowning slowly in their own lungs. There was no cure, only time and palliative care, and eventually death. If Kate had been dying, if she had known her time was limited— "You think her illness is connected to her death?" Clara said. "I think someone knew she was sick, and I think that knowledge mattered somehow." Cal moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. "Tomorrow I'll take you into town. People need to see Kate returned. I've prepared a story. You suffered a head injury in the fall, wandered for months with no memory of who you were, survived through the kindness of strangers until your memories began to return. You made your way back here, back to your family. They'll have questions. Let them question. Your job is to be uncertain, fragile, still recovering. If you don't remember details, that's expected. What matters is that you're here and your presence will force certain people to reveal themselves." Clara studied his profile. "Who do you suspect?" 3 people. Cal's jaw tightened. "Nathan Burke, who runs the Silver Vein Saloon. He was in love with Kate before she married me, proposed to her twice. After she refused him the second time, he turned bitter, spread rumors that she'd married me for money, that she regretted her choice. Did she? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. We weren't a love match, but we were companions. Or I thought we were. Now I wonder if I knew her at all. Who else? Dr. Isaiah Cross. He was the one who examined Kate's body, ruled the death accidental, but his report was cursory, barely 2 pages. And when I questioned his conclusions, he became defensive, angry, said I was letting grief cloud my judgment. And the third, Sheriff Tom Whitlock. He closed the investigation too quickly. Refused to interview witnesses beyond the initial statements. When I pushed for a more thorough inquiry, he told me some deaths don't have answers, and I needed to accept that. Cal turned to face her. One of them knows what really happened on that cliff, maybe all 3. Your job is to watch them, listen to them, and help me figure out which one is lying. Clara felt the familiar weight settling onto her shoulders, the weight of other people's secrets, the weight of death and its aftermath. In Philadelphia, she had carried it for her patients, easing them toward the end they begged for, but society forbade. Here she would carry it for a woman she had never met, wearing her skin like a costume while hunting for the truth of her final moments. I'll need to examine the coroner's report, Clara said, and I'll need to visit the place where she fell. Tomorrow, Cal moved toward the door. Tonight you should rest. Iris will come to you eventually. When she does, be patient. She tests people, tries to see if they're safe. He left Clara alone in the room that had belonged to a dead woman. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her spare dress beside Kate's elaborate wardrobe. Her things looked shabby in comparison, worn and mended, and utterly inadequate for the role she was meant to play. She found a nightgown in Kate's dresser, soft cotton, that smelled faintly of lavender. She changed into it, feeling like an imposter in more ways than one. Then she sat at the vanity, looking at her reflection in the mirror. The same mirror Kate had looked into. The same lamplight. The same shadows. Clara picked up Kate's hairbrush, pulled it through her own dark hair, watched as her strands mingled with the dead woman's. 2 women. 2 lives. 2 sets of secrets that had somehow led them both to this isolated house in the Montana wilderness. She opened the vanity drawer, searching for hairpins. Instead, she found a small tin box, unmarked and hidden at the back beneath sachets of dried herbs. She opened it. Inside were 3 items: a pressed flower, dried and brittle, a man's cufflink, expensive, engraved with initials that weren't Cal's, and a photograph. Clara held the photograph up to the lamp. 2 women stood together, arms linked, smiling at the camera. One was clearly Kate younger, her face unlined by whatever sorrows had marked her later years. The other woman looked startlingly similar. Same dark hair, same narrow face, same eyes that held sadness even in a moment meant to be joyful. Clara turned the photograph over. Written on the back in faded ink, Catherine and Clarabelle, Philadelphia Medical College, 1878. The photograph slipped from her numb fingers. Catherine, not Kate. And Clarabelle, not just any Clarabelle, but her. Clara recognized the dress in the photograph, recognized the young woman's face because she had seen it in her own mirror 10 years ago. She and Kate had known each other. More than known, they had trained together, studied together. And then Kate had vanished from the college, had disappeared so completely that Clara had eventually stopped asking what happened to the brilliant student who had simply failed to return after winter break. Her hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the vanity, trying to breathe, trying to think through the implications. Cal had known. He must have known. The letters he sent seeking someone with medical training, someone from Philadelphia, someone willing to disappear. It couldn't be coincidence. She stood cross to the door, wrenched it open. Cal's room was down the hall, a sliver of light visible beneath his door. She strode toward it, not bothering to knock, pushing it open with enough force to make it bang against the wall. Cal was seated at a desk, papers spread before him. He looked up unsurprised by her entrance, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You knew," Clara said. Her voice was steady, despite the fury burning through her veins. "You knew Kate and I had a connection. This wasn't random. You didn't just happen to find me through an advertisement. You searched for me specifically." Yes. The single word was a confession and a challenge. Why? Cal stood moved to a trunk at the foot of his bed and opened it. He withdrew a folder thick with papers and clippings. He handed it to her. Clara opened it. The first page was a newspaper article from the Philadelphia Inquirer dated 3 months prior. The headline screamed accusation, "Nurse accused of mercy killing." Clarabelle Ashford vanishes before trial. Beneath it another clipping, and another. A dozen stories tracking her alleged crime, the hospital's investigation, the patient's family demanding justice. And beneath those, something else. Private detective reports, photographs of Clara taken from a distance, records of her movements in the weeks before she fled Philadelphia. Cal had been watching her, tracking her, hunting her while she thought she was running free. "Kate left letters," Cal said quietly. "Hidden. I found them after her death. In them, she mentioned you, her friend from medical school, the one who shared her beliefs about mercy and suffering and the right to choose one's own end. She wrote about how you had both been forced to leave your training, how society punished women for having compassion that extended beyond acceptable boundaries." Clara's throat was tight. Kate was expelled too. For helping a patient die, a young mother with childbed fever suffering for days while the doctors debated treatment. Kate gave her morphine enough to ease her into sleep and then beyond. The woman's husband was grateful. The hospital was not. The similarities were suffocating. Clara had done the same, had crossed the same invisible line between healing and helping someone escape pain through the only door left open. "So you found me," Clara said. "You found someone with the same guilt, the same desperation to disappear. You knew I would say yes because I had nowhere else to go." "Yes." "And you want me to help you find Kate's killer so you can, what, have justice, revenge?" Cal's expression was impossible to read. "I want to understand why she died, whether it was connected to her past, to her illness, to something she knew, or something she did. I want to know if the woman I married was murdered because of who she was, or simply because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if I refuse, if I leave tonight, then you go back to Philadelphia and face trial for a murder you committed out of mercy. The authorities there are still looking for you. I could make one telegram and they would know where to find you." He paused. "But I don't think you'll refuse, because you want what Kate wanted, absolution, and you think maybe by solving her death you can somehow atone for the one you caused." The words were brutal in their accuracy. Clara felt them land like blows, each one striking the guilt she carried like a physical weight. She looked down at the papers in her hands, at the photograph of her younger self standing beside a woman she had once called friend. A woman who had walked a parallel path, made parallel choices, and ended in a shallow grave while Clara still breathed. "I'll stay," Clara said, "but not because you're blackmailing me. I'll stay because Kate deserves answers, and because I owe her this much." "For what?" "For surviving when she didn't." Cal nodded slowly. "Tomorrow we begin, but tonight you should rest. The performance starts at dawn, and it requires more strength than you imagine." Clara returned to Kate's room, to her room now. She sat on the bed, the photograph still clutched in her hand, and tried to remember the girl Kate had been before whatever tragedy had sent her west. Brilliant, that was the first word that came to mind. Kate had understood anatomy, pharmacology, the delicate balance of chemicals that could heal or harm. She had asked questions the professors couldn't answer, had pushed boundaries the other students feared to approach, and she had been sad. Even then, even before whatever happened to drive her from Philadelphia, there had been a melancholy in her eyes, as if she saw suffering everywhere and couldn't understand why others accepted it as inevitable. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened slowly, and Iris stood there in her nightgown slate, tucked under one arm. Clara waited. Iris crossed the room, climbed onto the bed with the careful movements of a child who had learned to make herself small. She picked up the photograph from where Clara had set it on the coverlet, studied it, then wrote on her slate and held it up. "That's Mama." "Who is the other lady?" "Me," Clara said. "When I was younger. Your mother and I were friends once a long time ago." Iris's chalk moved rapidly. "Papa said your Mama come back, but you're not. You're the friend." "Yes." "Did you come because Mama asked you to?" The question froze Clara. How could a 9-year-old child see through to the heart of something Clara herself had only just begun to understand, that perhaps Kate, knowing she was dying, knowing her time was short, had somehow arranged for Clara to take her place. Not just as a deception for Cal's investigation, but as a mother for the daughter she would have to leave behind. "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "Maybe, in a way." Iris set down her slate. She reached out with one small hand and touched Clara's face, fingers tracing the line of her cheek as if confirming she was real, solid, not another ghost haunting the spaces Kate had left empty. Then she curled against Clara's side, head resting on her shoulder. They sat together in the lamplight, the living and the bereaved, bound by the memory of a woman who had tried to choose her own ending and been denied even that final autonomy. Clara wrapped her arm around the girl, felt the fragile bird bones of her shoulders, the rapid beat of her heart. This child had witnessed something the night Kate died. This child held secrets locked behind the wall of her silence. "It's all right," Clara whispered. "You're safe now." But she didn't know if that was true. Didn't know if any of them were safe in this house where the past pressed against the present like a hand against glass, trying to break through, trying to be heard. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, making the old house creak and settle. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, covering tracks, hiding evidence, making everything look clean and pure, when Clara knew that beneath the surface blood always stained the ground. She thought about the three men Cal suspected: the spurned lover, the doctor who had examined Kate's broken body, the sheriff who had closed the case too quickly. One of them knew more than they had said. One of them had pushed a dying woman off a cliff, denying her even the mercy of choosing her own exit. And tomorrow she would meet them, would look into their eyes and smile and pretend to be the ghost they feared. Tomorrow the performance would begin. But tonight she held a silent child and stared at a photograph of two young women who had believed they could heal the world through mercy and learned instead that the world punished mercy as murder. Iris's breathing slowed, deepened. Sleep claimed her. Clara eased the girl down onto the bed, pulled the quilt over her small form. She stood crossed to the window, looked out at the forest pressing close. Somewhere out there was the cliff where Kate had fallen, where she had been pushed, where her life had ended and her secrets had been buried. Clara would unearth those secrets, would follow them wherever they led. Not just for Cal's sake, not just for justice or revenge or whatever he sought in his grief, but for Kate, for the friend she had lost and found again only in death. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, watching her breath fog the window, watching the snow fall into darkness. And in the reflection, just for a moment, she thought she saw another face overlaid with her own. Kate's face, Kate's sad eyes, Kate's silent plea. Find the truth. Finish what I couldn't. Clara nodded to the ghost in the glass. "I will," she promised. "Whatever it costs, I will." The lamp flickered, the wind howled, and somewhere in the forest a branch snapped under the weight of snow, the sound like bones breaking. The night deepened. The house settled into its secrets. And Clara stood watch over a sleeping child in a dead woman's room, wearing a dead woman's nightgown, preparing to step into a dead woman's life. Tomorrow she would become Kate Mercer. Tonight she mourned the loss of Clarabelle Ashford. The woman she had been was gone. The woman she would become was waiting in the morning light. And the truth, whatever it was, would demand payment in ways none of them could yet imagine. Morning came cold and merciless, the kind of winter dawn that turned breath to ice and made every movement feel like wading through frozen honey. Clara woke to find Iris gone from the bed, the indentation of her small body still visible in the quilt. Sunlight streamed through the window, weak and pale, illuminating dust motes that drifted like snow that had lost its way. She rose dressed in one of Kate's dark wool dresses. The fabric felt wrong against her skin, too tight in the shoulders, too loose in the waist. Kate had been smaller, more delicate. Clara would need to alter the clothes, but that would come later. Today required only the illusion of fit, the suggestion that Kate Mercer had returned home after 18 months of wandering. In the kitchen, Cal was frying eggs and bacon. Iris sat at the table drawing on her slate. She looked up when Clara entered, studied her with those two old eyes, then returned to her drawing. The scratch of chalk on slate was the only sound beyond the sizzle of fat in the pan. Cal set a plate before Clara without ceremony. "Eat. You'll need strength for what comes next. The town. The performance." He poured coffee strong and black. "Mrs. Chen will spread word this morning that Kate has returned. By noon, half of Bitterroot will have found excuses to pass by the house, hoping for a glimpse. By evening, the other half will come directly to the door with questions." Clara cut into her eggs. "And what do I tell them? As little as possible. You remember pieces, fragments, the fall, then nothing. Months of confusion of being cared for by strangers whose faces you can't quite recall. And then, slowly memories returning like dreams. Your name, your husband, your daughter. The pull home too strong to resist." Iris's chalk moved faster. Clara glanced at the slate. The girl was drawing a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, arms spread wide, as if embracing the fall. Behind her, another figure featureless and dark. "Iris," Cal said gently, "not at breakfast." The girl erased the drawing with one swift motion of her palm. They finished the meal in silence. Clara helped wash the dishes while Cal prepared the wagon. When she came outside, Iris was already seated in the back, wrapped in blankets against the cold. The girl's eyes tracked Clara's movements as she climbed up beside Cal. The ride into town took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of watching the forest give way to scattered homesteads, then to the clustered buildings of Bitterroot proper. Clara counted landmarks. The church with its white steeple, the general store with Mrs. Chen's neat lettering on the sign, the silver-veined saloon, its windows dark at this early hour, but its presence looming like a threat. And there, the doctor's office. A modest building painted green with a brass plate beside the door announcing Dr. Isaiah Cross, physician and surgeon. "We start there," Cal said, as if reading her thoughts. "You need to be examined. It's expected. Kate's been gone 18 months. The doctor needs to confirm you're in good health, document your return for official purposes, and observe his reaction when the dead walk through his door. That too." Cal tied the horse outside the doctor's office. He helped Clara down, his hand firm at her elbow, the touch impersonal but necessary. They were husband and wife, reunited after tragedy. They needed to look the part. Inside the office smelled of carbolic acid and old leather. Medical texts lined shelves along one wall. An examination table stood in the center of the room, covered with a white sheet that looked gray in the dim light filtering through curtained windows. And behind a desk, scratching notes in a ledger, sat a man who froze when he saw them. Dr. Isaiah Cross was younger than Clara had expected, perhaps 40, with dark hair silvering at the temples and hands that trembled as he set down his pen. His face went white, then red, then white again. He stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "Kate!" The name came out strangled. "Dear God, Kate!" Clara said nothing. Let him look. Let him see the impossibility standing before him. Cross came around the desk, stopped 3 feet away as if afraid to come closer. "They said you were dead. I examined your body. I wrote the death certificate. I attended your funeral." "Apparently," Clara said softly, "you were mistaken." The doctor's hands opened and closed at his sides. He looked to Cal. "How is this possible?" "She survived the fall," Cal said. His voice was flat, giving nothing away. "Injured, confused. She doesn't remember much of the past 18 months, but she's home now and I'd like you to examine her. Make certain the injuries healed properly." Cross swallowed hard. "Of course, yes. Mrs. Mercer, if you would sit on the examination table." Clara moved past him, aware of his eyes tracking her every step. She seated herself on the table, hands folded in her lap. The doctor approached slowly, as one might approach a wild animal or a ghost. "I need to check your pulse," he said. "Your breathing. Look in your eyes." He touched her wrist fingers, finding the steady beat of her heart. His hand shook. Clara watched his face, saw the conflict there. Fear and confusion and something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "Your pulse is strong," he said. "Breathing sounds clear." He produced a small torch, shone it in her eyes. "Pupils respond normally. Do you have any pain?" "Headaches, dizziness." "Sometimes," Clara said. "When I try to remember, it's like looking through fog." That's consistent with head trauma. Cross stepped back, professional mask slipping back into place. But his hands still trembled. The human brain is resilient, but mysterious. I've seen cases where patients recover from seemingly fatal injuries and others where minor blows cause permanent damage. You're fortunate, Mrs. Mercer. Very fortunate. Am I? Clara let the question hang. Cross's throat worked. He glanced at Cal, then back to Clara. I should take some notes. For the official record, can you describe what you remember of the fall, standing on the cliff, wind, the sensation of falling, then nothing for a very long time? And after, how did you survive? Strangers. A family traveling through found me near the river. They cared for me, nursed me back to health. When my memories began returning, I made my way home. The lies came easily smoothed by repetition, made believable through sparse detail. Cross wrote it all down his pen, scratching across paper with the sound of a small animal scurrying. There's something I need to ask you, Cross said, without looking up from his notes. Before your accident, were you experiencing any illness, coughing night sweats, weight loss? Clara's breath caught. This was it, the opening. Why do you ask? Because when I examined your body after the fall, I noticed signs consistent with consumption. Early stages, but progressing. I mentioned it to your husband at the time, though perhaps he doesn't remember, given his grief. Cal's expression remained neutral, but Clara saw his hands tighten on his hat brim. You never mentioned consumption. I did, Cross said quietly. You were distraught. Perhaps you don't recall. I recall everything you said that day, Doctor, and consumption was not among the words you used. Silence stretched between them, brittle as ice over deep water. Cross set down his pen. Then I misspoke, or perhaps I tried to spare you additional pain. Your wife had just died. Learning she was also dying seemed cruel. Was she? Clara asked. Dying. Cross looked at her directly for the first time since the examination began. If you're truly Kate Mercer, you would know the answer to that question. The challenge was unmistakable. Clara met his gaze, held it. My memories are incomplete. I know I felt unwell, tired, but I attributed it to the isolation, the long winters. I didn't want to burden my husband with complaints. How considerate. Cross's tone held an edge. And now, do you still experience symptoms? No. Miraculous. He closed his ledger with a snap. You've made a remarkable recovery, Mrs. Mercer, from a fatal fall and a progressive lung disease. One might almost call it divine intervention. Cal stepped forward. Are you suggesting my wife is not who she claims to be? I'm suggesting, Cross said carefully, that the body I examined was badly damaged from the fall. The face was unrecognizable. Identification was made based on clothing location and the fact that Kate Mercer was the only woman reported missing in the area at that time. He paused. If I made an error in identification, if another woman fell from that cliff and Kate survived, then I owe you both an apology for the grief I caused. You examined her yourself, Cal said. Are you saying you can't confirm the woman sitting before you is the same one you pronounced dead? Cross's jaw worked. 18 months is a long time. Trauma changes people. If Mrs. Mercer has lost weight, if her features have altered due to illness and recovery, if my memory is imperfect, then, yes, I could be mistaken. But my medical opinion stands. The woman I examined had consumption. If this woman does not, then either she was miraculously cured or she is not the same person. Clara slid down from the examination table. Thank you for your time, Doctor. I'm glad to know I'm in good health, whatever the explanation. She moved toward the door. Cal followed. Behind them, Cross called out, Mrs. Mercer, one more thing. Clara turned. The medicine I provided you before your accident, the morphine, for the pain and the cough. Did you take it all? The question landed like a stone in still water ripples spreading outward. Clara kept her expression neutral. I don't recall, because I gave you quite a substantial amount. Enough to last several months if used as directed. If used otherwise, he left the sentence unfinished. Otherwise? Cal's voice was dangerous. Otherwise, it would have been enough to ensure a peaceful end, if someone were in pain. If someone wanted to control the manner of their death rather than wait for disease to take them inch by inch. The implication hung in the air between them. Cross had given Kate morphine. Enough morphine to kill herself if she chose. And he wanted them to know he had done so deliberately. "Thank you for your honesty," Clara said. "It's refreshing." Outside, the winter sun seemed too bright after the dimness of the doctor's office. Clara breathed deeply, clearing her lungs of carbolic acid and secrets. Cal helped her into the wagon without speaking. Iris watched from the back, her slate clutched to her chest like armor. They drove to the general store. Mrs. Chen looked up from her counter when they entered, face carefully neutral. But Clara saw recognition flicker in her eyes. Not recognition of Kate, but of Clara herself, the imposter wearing a dead woman's dress. "Mrs. Mercer," Chen said formally. "Mr. Mercer mentioned you had returned. Welcome home." Other customers in the store had frozen staring. An older woman with a basket of eggs, a young man buying tobacco, a child who clung to her mother's skirts and stared with the unfiltered curiosity of the young. Clara inclined her head. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. It's good to be home." "You must have many stories to tell," Chen said. "About your time away?" "Very few, I'm afraid. My memories are still recovering." The older woman with the eggs moved closer. "Kate Mercer, I heard the rumors but couldn't believe them. We buried you. I attended your funeral. Then I apologize for the inconvenience of my survival." The woman flinched as if struck. She looked to Cal. "How do we know this is really her? How do we know this isn't some confidence scheme?" Cal's expression hardened. "Are you calling my wife a liar? I'm saying we buried a body. That body came from somewhere. If it wasn't Kate, then who was it?" Mrs. Chen intervened smoothly. "Perhaps this conversation would be better held in private, Mrs. Whitlock. I'm sure the Mercers would prefer not to have their personal tragedy discussed in front of the entire town." Whitlock, the sheriff's mother. Clara studied the woman more carefully. She had the same hard eyes as her son, the same stubborn set to her jaw. "My son will want to speak with you," Mrs. Whitlock said to Clara. "He'll have questions about where you've been, what happened." "I'm happy to cooperate with any official inquiry," Clara said. "Official?" The woman snorted. "Nothing official about it, just a mother's concern that the dead should stay decently buried instead of walking around disturbing the peace." She left eggs forgotten on the counter. The other customers followed quickly, as if Clara carried some contagion they feared to catch. Within moments, the store was empty, save for Cal, Clara, Iris, and Mrs. Chen. Chen locked the door, turned the sign to closed. "That went as well as could be expected." "She doesn't believe I'm Kate," Clara said. "No one will believe it entirely," Chen replied. "They'll convince themselves because the alternative is too disturbing to accept. But doubt will linger. You need to be very careful. Doubt makes people dangerous." Cal was examining a shelf of canned goods, his back to them. "Did you know," he asked without turning, "about the morphine Cross gave Kate?" Mrs. Chen's face closed. "I knew Kate was ill. I suspected she was managing pain in her own way, Doctor. Cross's methods are sometimes unconventional but effective." "Unconventional," Cal repeated. "Is that what we're calling it? What would you call it?" He turned finally. "I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know what any of this means." Iris tugged on Clara's sleeve. When Clara looked down, the girl held up her slate. "Can we go to the cliff? I want to show you something." Clara read the words, felt ice settle in her stomach. "Iris wants to visit the place where Kate fell." Cal's face went tight. "Absolutely not. She hasn't been near that cliff since the night it happened. I won't let her relive that trauma." The girl wrote again, more urgently. "I need to show Clara what I saw. It's important." "No," Cal said firmly. "It's too dangerous, physically and emotionally." But Clara knelt before Iris, meeting her eyes. "If you're ready to show me, I'm ready to see, but only if you're certain, and only if your father agrees." Iris looked at Cal, pleading written in every line of her small body. Cal closed his eyes. When he opened them, they held defeat. "After lunch, and we stay well back from the edge." The cliff was a 20-minute ride from town up a narrow trail that wound through dense forest. Snow had drifted deep here untouched, except for the tracks of deer and smaller animals. The trees pressed close, their branches heavy, with white creating a silence so complete it felt oppressive. They dismounted where the trail ended. Cal lifted Iris down, holding her longer than necessary, as if he could protect her through sheer force of will. Then he led them forward on foot, following a path that only he could see. The trees fell away, suddenly, opening onto a rocky outcrop that jutted over a steep valley. Far below, a frozen river snaked between ice-covered boulders. The drop was perhaps 60 feet. Survivable if one was very lucky, fatal if one was not. Clara stood 10 feet back from the edge, scanning the area. Rock, snow, a few hardy bushes clinging to cracks in the stone. And there, half buried in snow, near the cliff face, something that glinted in the pale sunlight. She moved closer, knelt, brushed snow away from a piece of metal. A locket, silver tarnished black in places with a delicate chain broken in 2 places. "Don't touch it," Cal said sharply, but Clara had already picked it up, turning it over in her gloved hands. There was an inscription on the back, worn but legible. "E.C. Eliza Cross," Mrs. Chen had said. When Clara showed her the locket later that evening, after they had returned to town and Cal had gone to check on some business at his mining claim, Chen held the locket up to lamplight, squinting at the inscription. "Dr. Cross's wife. She died 5 years ago. Oh, consumption. A terrible death by all accounts. She suffered for months." Chen's voice was careful. "Isaiah Cross is a good doctor, but he could do nothing for his own wife except ease her pain in the final weeks." Clara thought about the morphine Cross had given Kate, about mercy and medicine, and the thin line between healing and harm. Did he ease her pain, or did he help her end it? Chen set down the locket, her expression unreadable. "I was a nurse before I came to Bitterroot, not trained in your Eastern colleges, but I learned from doctors who served in the war. I know what morphine can do. I know how much is needed to kill pain and how much is needed to kill the patient." "And you think Cross gave his wife the latter?" "I think Eliza Cross died peacefully, without the drowning sensation that comes in the final stages of consumption. I think her husband loved her enough to spare her that particular horror." Chen paused. "And I think he has lived with the weight of that decision every day since." Clara picked up the locket again, opened it. Inside were 2 photographs, one of a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, Eliza. The other was a pressed flower, dried and brown with age. "Why would this be at the cliff where Kate died?" Clara asked. "I don't know, but Eliza Cross never went to that place when she was alive. She was too ill to venture far from home in her final months. So either someone brought her locket there after her death, or it was taken there by someone who had reason to keep it." Clara closed the locket, slipped it into her pocket. "I need to speak with Cross again." "That would be unwise. If he knows you found this, if he realizes you're asking questions about his wife's death, he may become defensive. Or worse." "Worse?" Chen's eyes were dark and unreadable. "Men who have already crossed certain lines once find it easier to cross them again, especially if they believe they're protecting themselves or honoring the dead." That night, Clara lay in Kate's bed and thought about mercy killings and the doctors who performed them. She thought about the patient she had helped to die in Philadelphia, the old man racked with cancer who had begged her for release. She had given him morphine, measured the dose carefully, watched as his breathing slowed and stopped, and the pain finally left his face. His family had called it murder. The hospital had called it gross negligence. The law had called it manslaughter. But the old man, in his final moments of consciousness, had called it mercy. Kate had been dying of consumption. Cross had given her morphine. If Kate had chosen to use that morphine to end her suffering before the disease did, would that be so different from what Clara herself had done? But Kate hadn't died from morphine. She had died from a fall, from being pushed. The question was whether she had been pushed before she could drink the poison, or whether the morphine was irrelevant to a murder that had nothing to do with mercy. Clara rose, unable to sleep. She lit a lamp, pulled on Kate's robe, and moved through the silent house. In the kitchen, she found Cal sitting at the table, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. He looked up when she entered. Couldn't sleep either. Too many questions. Questions have a way of multiplying in the dark. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, unless you'd prefer to be alone." Clara sat. The lamplight carved deep shadows into Cal's face, making him look older than his years. She studied him, this man who had brought her here under false pretenses, who had manipulated her desperation into partnership. "Tell me about Kate," she said. "Not the Kate everyone else knew. The woman you lived with. The mother of your child." Cal turned the whiskey glass in slow circles. She was competent, organized. She ran the household efficiently, managed money well, never complained about the isolation or the hard winters. She read to Iris every night. She tended a garden in summer. She was everything a frontier wife should be. But I never knew what she was thinking. She smiled at appropriate times, spoke when spoken to, performed every duty expected of her. And beneath it all, I sensed this profound sadness, like she was living her life at a distance, watching herself go through motions, but never fully present. Clara understood that kind of sadness. She had felt it herself in the months after the scandal in Philadelphia, when she had continued working and eating and speaking, while some essential part of herself had retreated to a place where accusations couldn't reach. "Did you love her?" The question emerged before Clara could stop it. Cal was quiet for a long time. "I respected her, cared for her welfare, felt protective of her. But love," he shook his head. "I don't know if either of us knew how to love anymore. We were both too damaged by whatever had come before. And yet you want to find her killer, to have justice for her. Justice." He spoke the word like a curse. "Is that what I want? Or do I just want to understand why she died? Whether it was random violence or something planned, whether I failed to protect her from a threat I didn't see, or whether there was never anything I could have done." He drank the whiskey, finally draining it in one swallow. "There's something I didn't tell you, something I learned after her death." Clara waited. "Kate was pregnant when she fell. 3 months. The words landed like physical blows. Clara felt her breath catch. "Did you know before she died?" "No, Cross found it during the examination of her body. He told me privately, suggested we keep it quiet, said it would only cause gossip if people knew she was carrying a child." "Why would that cause gossip?" Cal's expression was bleak. "Because I was away working a mining contract 4 months before she died, gone for 6 weeks. When I returned, Kate was distant, withdrawn, more so than usual. I assumed it was loneliness, resentment at being left alone with Iris for so long. Now I know it was something else." Understanding dawned. "The child wasn't yours." "Couldn't be. The timing doesn't work." He set down the glass with careful precision. "So not only did someone kill my wife, they killed a child that she conceived while I was gone. A child whose father is somewhere in this town walking free, possibly the same man who pushed her off that cliff." Clara thought about the cufflink she had found in Kate's drawer, the expensive cufflink engraved with initials that weren't Cal's. "Do you have suspicions about who the father might be?" "Only one man in Bitterroot has the kind of money that matches that cufflink, Nathan Burke, and he was in love with Kate long before she married me." "Have you confronted him?" "Not yet. I wanted more evidence first, but maybe it's time." Cal stood. "Tomorrow I'll pay Burke a visit. You should come. See how he reacts when he sees Kate risen from the dead." Clara rose as well. They stood close in the small kitchen, the lamp casting their shadows together on the wall. For a moment neither moved. Then Cal reached out, not touching her, but coming close, his hand hovering near her cheek. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for doing this, for wearing her skin and asking her questions and trying to untangle her secrets. I know it costs you. It costs us both. Yes?" He dropped his hand. "But maybe some costs are worth paying, if the truth is valuable enough." He left her there in the kitchen. Clara extinguished the lamp and made her way back to Kate's room in darkness, her fingers trailing along the wall for guidance. She thought about Kate, pregnant with another man's child, dying from consumption, planning her own death with morphine provided by a doctor who understood mercy. And she thought about someone who had denied Kate that choice, who had pushed her before she could drink the poison, robbing her even of autonomy in death. That was the true crime, Clara realized. Not the killing itself, but the denial of Kate's agency. Someone had stolen her final choice. The next morning brought Nathan Burke to their door. Clara was helping Iris with letters when the knock came. Cal answered, and through the doorway, Clara saw a man in his late 30s, handsome in a polished way that spoke of money and careful grooming. He wore a suit that would have looked appropriate in San Francisco or Denver, but seemed overdone for a Montana mining town. His eyes went immediately to Clara. "Kate!" The name was a whisper. "My God, the rumors are true." Cal stepped aside, allowing Burke to enter. The man moved slowly as if approaching something that might vanish if he moved too quickly. He stopped 3 feet from Clara, staring. "How?" Burke's voice cracked. "I saw them lower your coffin into the ground. I put flowers on your grave every week. How are you standing here?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "It seems I'm harder to kill than anyone imagined." Burke flinched. "I never wanted you dead. Never. You have to know that." "I don't know anything anymore. My memories are fragmented." "Then let me help you remember." Burke reached into his coat, withdrew an envelope. "I brought these. Letters you wrote me before your accident. Perhaps they'll help." Cal moved between them. "What letters?" "Correspondence Kate and I exchanged over the years." "Nothing improper?" Burke added quickly. "Just friendly letters between old acquaintances. I saved them. Sentimental of me, perhaps, but I couldn't bear to destroy anything connected to her." Clara took the envelope. Inside were 3 letters in Kate's handwriting addressed to Nathan. She scanned them quickly. They were brief, cordial, discussing weather and town gossip. Nothing intimate, nothing that suggested an affair. "And yet, there should be more," Burke said, "from the last few months before you died, but I couldn't find them. I think perhaps you took them back or destroyed them." "Why would I do that?" Burke's eyes were pained. "Because the last letter you wrote me, the one from 3 days before you fell, it said you were planning to leave. To go away, where no one could find you. You asked me to help you disappear." Silence crashed over the room. Cal's face went white. "You're lying." "I wish I were." Burke pulled out another envelope, this one containing a single sheet. "Read it yourself. It's in her handwriting. You'll recognize it." Cal snatched the letter, read it with eyes that grew harder with each word. Then he looked at Clara. "Did you write this?" She read over his shoulder. The handwriting matched the diary entries. The phrasing was Kate's, and the content was damning. "Nathan, I can't do this anymore. The pretense, the isolation, the slow decay of everything I once was. I'm sick and I'm dying, and I won't let Cal watch it happen. I need to disappear. Can you help me? I have some money saved, enough to start over somewhere no one knows me. Please, if you ever cared for me, help me vanish." She was planning to leave, Clara said slowly, to abandon her family and die alone somewhere rather than burden them with her illness. "She was planning to kill herself," Cal said flatly. "That's what this means. She wanted to disappear so she could use Cross's morphine without it coming back on anyone, without subjecting Iris to the horror of finding her." Burke looked stricken. "I told her no. I said I wouldn't help her run away from people who loved her. I said if she was dying, she should be with family. We argued. It was our last conversation. 3 days later, she was dead." "And you never told anyone about this letter," Cal said. "I was protecting her memory. If people knew she was suicidal, they'd have said terrible things, claimed she was a coward or a sinner. I couldn't let that happen." Cal's hands clenched. "You let me spend 18 months believing she was murdered. Let me obsess over finding her killer. Let me bring this woman here and put her in danger, all while you knew Kate wanted to die." "I didn't know she wasn't murdered." Burke's voice rose. "The letter proves she was planning to kill herself, yes. But that doesn't mean someone didn't push her. Maybe she went to the cliff to jump, and someone else was there. Maybe they argued, and it became physical. The letter doesn't explain the how, only the why." Clara studied Burke carefully. His distress seemed genuine, but he was a saloon owner accustomed to performing emotion for profit. Still, the letter felt real. The desperation in it matched what she knew of Kate's situation. "There's something else," Burke said. "Something I need to confess. I was there that night. Not at the cliff, but in the forest nearby. I followed Kate because I was worried about her. I wanted to convince her not to do something irreversible." Cal went very still. "You were there. I saw her walking toward the cliff. I called out to her, but she didn't stop. Then I heard voices. Kate's and someone else's, a woman. They were arguing. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was heated. Then I heard a scream, and I ran. By the time I reached the cliff, Kate was already falling, and the other woman was gone." "Who was she?" Clara demanded. "I don't know. It was dark. I only saw her from behind, small, dark clothing. She disappeared into the trees before I could see her face." "And you told no one," Cal said dangerously. "You let the investigation proceed without mentioning you were a witness." "Because I was terrified." Burke's composure cracked. "Don't you see I followed Kate into the woods at night? I was the last person known to see her alive besides the killer. If I came forward, I'd have been the prime suspect. Sheriff Whitlock already disliked me. He'd have arrested me immediately, and the real killer would have walked free." Cal looked at Clara. "Do you believe him?" She considered. Burke's story was convenient, painting himself as a well-meaning friend rather than a potential murderer. But it also matched other evidence. Kate had planned to die. Someone else had been at the cliff. The question was whether Burke was that someone, or whether he was telling the truth about a third party. "I believe Kate wanted to die," Clara said carefully. "I believe she had morphine and a plan. Whether someone pushed her before she could execute that plan, or whether her fall was accidental during a confrontation, I can't say. But the woman you saw, the woman arguing with Kate at the cliff, she's the key to everything." "Find her," Burke said. "Find her, and you find the truth." After Burke left, Cal paced the kitchen like a caged animal. Iris had retreated upstairs, disturbed by the raised voices and tension. Clara sat at the table rereading Kate's letter to Burke. "She wanted to die," Cal said finally. "My wife wanted to die, and I never saw it. Never asked the right questions. Never pushed past her careful facade to the desperation beneath. You couldn't have known. I should have known." He stopped pacing, braced his hands on the table. "I shared a bed with her for 6 years. I watched her with our daughter. I ate meals across from her day after day. And I never saw how much pain she was in. What kind of husband does that make me?" Clara reached out, placed her hand over his. "The kind who did the best he could with the information he had. Kate was skilled at hiding her suffering. You said so yourself. She performed her role perfectly. You're not to blame for believing the performance." His hand turned under hers, gripping her fingers. The touch was fierce, almost desperate. "Then who do I hold accountable for the fact that my wife felt so alone she'd rather die than ask for help? Sometimes there's no one to blame. Sometimes pain just is, and people respond to it in ways we can't predict or prevent." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, bound by the weight of Kate's secrets and their own guilt. Then Cal pulled away, turned to the window. "We need to find the woman Burke saw. If she exists, if she was really at the cliff that night, she can tell us whether Kate jumped or was pushed." "And if Burke made her up?" Clara asked. "If he's lying to cover his own involvement, then we prove it and make him answer for what he did." Clara thought about the investigation she'd agreed to. What had started as a simple exchange, her cooperation for Cal's protection, had become something more complex. She was hunting not just a murderer, but the truth about a woman who had walked parallel to her own path. A woman who had made the same choice Clara had made to ease suffering through mercy that society called murder. If Kate had succeeded in her plan, if she had taken the morphine and died on her own terms, would Clara think less of her? Or would she understand, as perhaps only someone who had crossed that same line could understand? The kitchen door opened. Mrs. Chen entered without knocking, her face tight with concern. "Sheriff Whitlock is coming. I saw him leaving his office heading this way. He looked determined." Cal straightened. "Let him come. I'm ready for his questions." "Are you ready for his accusations?" Chen looked at Clara. "Because he's not coming to welcome Kate home. He's coming to prove she's an imposter." The sheriff arrived 5 minutes later, his mother in tow. Mrs. Whitlock's face was triumphant, as if she'd been vindicated in some private belief. The sheriff himself looked uncomfortable, a man being pushed into conflict he'd rather avoid. "Mrs. Mercer," Whitlock said formally, "I need to ask you some questions. Official inquiries related to your disappearance and return." "Of course, Sheriff," Clara said. "I'm happy to cooperate." "Where exactly were you for the past 18 months?" Clara recited the story they'd prepared. The fall, the injury, the kind strangers, the slow return of memory. She kept her voice steady, her details vague but consistent. Whitlock listened without expression. When she finished, he said, "That's a remarkable story. Convenient, too. No names of the people who helped you. No specific locations we could verify. just a miraculous recovery and a homecoming that benefits certain parties financially and emotionally. "What are you suggesting?" Cal's voice was dangerous. "I'm suggesting," Whitlock said, "that this woman is not Kate Mercer. I'm suggesting she's a confidence artist you hired to play the part, perhaps to claim insurance money or settle some other debt. And I'm suggesting that if she persists in this deception, I'll have no choice but to arrest both of you for fraud." Mrs. Whitlock stepped forward. "I know my own neighbor's sheriff. I attended Kate Mercer's funeral. That woman in the coffin was Kate, and this woman standing here is not. I'd stake my life on it." Clara remained calm. "Then you're mistaken, Mrs. Whitlock. I understand my return is shocking, but I assure you I am who I claim to be." "Prove it," the older woman snapped. "Tell me something only Kate would know, some private detail from before your supposed accident." Clara's mind raced. She knew facts about Kate from the diary, from the letters, from the months of preparation. But private details, shared memories. She had none of those. Then Iris appeared at the top of the stairs. The girl descended slowly, slate clutched to her chest. She walked past the adults to stand before the sheriff and his mother. She wrote on her slate and held it up. "She knows Mama's lullaby, the one only Mama sang to me." Whitlock frowned. "What lullaby?" Iris wrote again. "Ask her to sing it. If she's not Mama, she won't know it." All eyes turned to Clara. She felt panic rise. What lullaby? She had no knowledge of any songs Kate had sung. This was a test she couldn't pass, and Iris knew it. But why was the girl helping her? Clara knelt before Iris met her eyes. The girl stared back, and in that gaze Clara saw calculation. Iris knew Clara wasn't Kate, had known from the beginning, but she was protecting the deception anyway. Why Iris's hand moved writing so quickly, the chalk scratched. The words appeared and were wiped away before anyone else could read them. "Because you're trying to find who killed Mama. And I want them punished." Clara stood. She turned to face Mrs. Whitlock. And then from some deep place in her memory, she pulled forth a song her own mother had sung. A lullaby she had heard as a child in Philadelphia before scandal and death had silenced all the gentle things. She sang. Her voice was rough, unpracticed, but the melody was true. A song about stars and sleep and safety that would never truly come. Iris watched her face unreadable. When the song ended, the girl nodded and wrote on her slate. "That's it. That's Mama's song." Mrs. Whitlock's face fell. "But I never heard Kate sing that." "You weren't there at bedtime," Iris wrote. "This was private, just for me." The sheriff looked between his mother and Iris, clearly torn. Finally he said, "I'm not satisfied. But I don't have enough evidence to dispute the child's word. Mrs. Mercer, I'll be watching you. If I find any proof of deception, I'll act on it immediately." "I expect nothing less," Clara said. After they left, Iris climbed into Clara's lap. The girl was warm and solid, her heart beating against Clara's chest like a small bird's wings. Clara held her wondering at this strange alliance between a woman running from murder and a child seeking justice for it. "Thank you," Clara whispered. Iris wrote on her slate without pulling away from the embrace. "I know you're not Mama, but you're trying to help. That makes you better than all the people who know the truth and do nothing." Clara pressed her face into the girl's hair, felt tears threaten for the first time since arriving in Bitterroot. This child, this damaged, brilliant child, had chosen to trust her, had decided that the pursuit of truth mattered more than the comfort of familiar lies. That night, after Iris had fallen asleep in her own bed, Clara searched Kate's room more thoroughly. She found the tin box again with its flower and cufflink and photograph, but this time she noticed the false bottom, a tiny gap where the metal didn't quite sit flush. She pried it up. Beneath lay a single sheet of paper folded small. She unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, not to Burke or Cal or anyone Clara recognized. It was addressed to someone named Clarabelle. Clara's hands began to shake as she read. "My dearest friend, if you're reading this, I am dead. And if my husband followed through on the contingency plan we discussed, you are now living in my house, wearing my clothes, caring for my daughter. I'm sorry to have trapped you this way, sorry to have used your guilt and your desperation, but I had no one else to turn to. You and I, we understand suffering in ways others cannot. We've both crossed the line between healing and harm. We've both been called murderers for showing mercy. And we both know what it means to live with the weight of that choice. I'm dying, Clarabelle. The consumption is progressing faster than I anticipated. I have perhaps 3 months left, and those months will be agony. Dr. Cross has given me morphine enough to end things on my terms, but I can't do it here. Can't let Iris find me. Can't let Cal spend the rest of his life wondering if he could have saved me. So I'm planning to disappear, to walk into the forest and never return, to make it look like an accident so no one bears the burden of my choice. But I'm terrified I'll lose my courage. Terrified I'll linger too long and die slowly instead of decisively. That's where you come in. After I'm gone, Cal will search for answers. He's stubborn that way. And in his searching, he'll find you. A woman accused of mercy killing. A woman who needs to disappear. He'll offer you a deal, and you'll accept because you have nowhere else to go. You'll come here. You'll wear my name. And in doing so, you'll give Iris a mother who understands that sometimes love means letting go. Someone who won't teach her that suffering must be endured. Someone who will show her that we always have choices even when it seems we don't. I'm sorry to manipulate you this way, but I trust you, Clarabelle. Trust you to care for my daughter. Trust you to teach her the lessons I never could. And trust you to forgive me for using your guilt as leverage. If I succeed in dying on my own terms, destroy this letter. Tell no one. Let Cal believe whatever story he needs to believe. But if I fail, if someone finds me before I can finish what I started, then perhaps this letter will help you understand why. We are sisters in mercy, you and I. Sisters in the terrible knowledge that sometimes death is kinder than life. Forgive me, and thank you. Kate, P.S. I've left a second letter for Caleb with my will to be opened only after my death. In it, I've told him about you not by name, but by description. A nurse accused of mercy killing, someone who would understand. I've asked him to find you, though I've made it seem like a practical arrangement rather than my final wish. He needs to feel in control of something, even if it's an illusion I've carefully constructed. Let him believe this was his idea. He'll need that. Clara read the letter 3 times. Her hands shook so badly the paper rustled like leaves in wind. Kate had known. Had known Clara would come. Had planned for it, prepared for it, manipulated events from beyond the grave to ensure her daughter would be cared for by someone who understood. But the letter confirmed what Burke had said. Kate had planned her own death, had intended to walk away and never return. So what had happened on the cliff? Who was the woman Burke claimed to have seen? And why had Kate fallen before she could execute her plan? Clara folded the letter, slipped it into her pocket. Tomorrow she would show it to Cal, would watch his face as he realized his dead wife had been planning her exit for months, would see whether he could accept that Kate had chosen death, chosen to leave him and Iris, chosen the cliff over the slow drowning of consumption. But tonight she sat in the darkness and mourned. Not for Kate exactly, but for the world that had driven 2 skilled healers to become dealers in death. For the society that punished mercy and forced those who practiced it to hide and scheme and eventually flee. She thought about the old man in Philadelphia, about his gratitude in those final moments, about the peace that had settled over his face as the morphine took him gently toward the dark. She had done right by him. She knew that in her bones, knew it with a certainty that no court could shake. And Kate had tried to do right by herself and her daughter, had tried to control her exit to spare those she loved the horror of watching her waste away. The crime wasn't that Kate had wanted to die. The crime was that someone had stolen even that choice from her, had pushed her before she could drink the poison, had denied her the mercy she sought. That was what Clara would hunt now, not a murderer in the conventional sense, but someone who had committed the unforgivable act of robbing a dying woman of her final autonomy. Outside an owl called. The sound was lonely and sharp, a creature of darkness announcing its presence to the night. Clara listened until the calling stopped. Then she rose, moved through the sleeping house to Iris's room. The girl was curled under her quilts, one hand clutching her slate, even in sleep. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, brushed hair back from the child's forehead. Iris stirred, opened her eyes. "I found your mother's letter," Clara whispered. "I know she arranged for me to come here. No, she wanted me to care for you." Iris's eyes were solemn in the darkness. "I promise," Clara said. "I promise I'll find out what really happened to her, and I promise I'll teach you that you always have choices, always have the right to decide your own path, no matter what anyone else says." The girl reached up, touched Clara's face. Her fingers were warm. Then she pulled Clara down until they were lying together, and she tucked herself against Clara's side with the trust of a child who had finally found safety. Clara held her while she slept, held her and made silent promises to the ghost who had engineered this strange family from beyond the grave. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more investigations, more lies layered upon lies. But tonight she had this: a child's trust, a dead woman's faith, and the certainty that some mercies were worth any price, even the price of her own soul. The morning after Clara found Kate's letter, she woke to find Iris standing beside the bed, fully dressed, slate in hand. The girl's expression was determined, older than her 9 years should allow. The words on the slate were simple: "Today we find the truth." Clara sat up, studied the child's face. "What makes you think today is different from any other day?" Iris wrote quickly. "Because I'm ready to tell what I saw, all of it." They gathered in the kitchen. Cal made coffee with hands that betrayed his tension through small tremors. Clara placed Kate's letter on the table between them. The paper yellowed and creased from its hiding place. Cal read it once, then again, his face draining of color with each word. "She planned it," he said finally. His voice was hollow. "Every detail, even your arrival. She orchestrated her own death and your replacement like some morbid theater production." "She was trying to protect Iris," Clara said, "and you. She didn't want you to watch her die slowly. So instead she made me watch her die suddenly, made me spend 18 months chasing ghosts and conspiracies when the simple truth was that my wife wanted to leave." Cal crumpled the letter in his fist. "I don't know which is worse, that she planned to abandon us, or that someone stopped her before she could do it on her own terms." Iris tapped her slate insistently. The sound drew both adults' attention. "I know who was at the cliff. I saw her face." Cal went very still. "Who?" But Iris shook her head, wrote again. "Not until we're all together. Mrs. Chen needs to be here too." "Why Chen?" Clara asked. "Because she's part of this. She knows things she hasn't told you." Cal left to fetch Mrs. Chen. Clara and Iris sat in silence, the weight of revelation pressing down like the low clouds that promised more snow. Through the window, Clara watched the forest dark pines heavy with white and wondered how many secrets were buried beneath that pristine surface. Mrs. Chen arrived within the hour, her face composed but wary. She glanced at the letter still lying crumpled on the table, then at Iris, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, and perhaps relief. "The girl has decided to speak," Chen said. "Not a question." Iris nodded. She stood, positioned herself where all three adults could see her slate clearly. Then she began to write each word deliberate, each sentence a careful excavation of buried trauma. "The night Mama died, I followed her. I wasn't supposed to. Papa thought I was asleep, but I heard Mama leave and I was scared. She'd been sad for so long. I thought maybe she was leaving us forever." Cal's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I followed her through the forest to the cliff. She stood at the edge for a long time, just standing, looking down. She had a bottle in her hand. Medicine, I thought. She kept lifting it like she was going to drink, then lowering it again." Iris paused, erased, continued. "Then someone else came. A woman. She called out to Mama, and Mama turned around. I hid behind a tree. I was too far away to hear everything they said, but their voices were angry, scared. The woman kept saying no over and over. Mama was crying. Mrs. Chen had gone very pale. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The woman tried to take the bottle from Mama. They struggled, not fighting exactly, more like Mama trying to keep something and the woman trying to save her from it. Then Mama's foot slipped. She was too close to the edge. The ground gave way, and she fell. Tears streaked down Iris's face, but her hand kept moving. The woman screamed. She ran to the edge, looked down. Then she saw me. We stared at each other. She was crying too. She said, "I'm sorry," over and over. Then she ran away into the trees. Iris set down her chalk, looked directly at Mrs. Chen. "It was you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Chen closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were wet. "Yes," she said quietly, "it was me." Cal stood so abruptly, his chair crashed backward. "You killed her! You were the one who pushed her!" "I didn't push her," Chen said, her voice steady despite the tears. "She slipped. We were struggling over the morphine bottle, and the ground was unstable from rain the week before. She lost her footing. I tried to grab her, but I was too late." "You let me believe it was an accident," Cal said. His voice was dangerous, controlled fury, barely leashed. "You came to her funeral. You brought food to my house. You watched me grieve and said nothing." Clara reached into her pocket, pulled out the silver locket. "This was at the cliff. Eliza Cross's locket. Why were you wearing it?" Mrs. Chen stared at the locket, her face crumbling. "I've worn it every day since I helped Eliza die, hidden under my collar where no one could see. A reminder, a punishment." Her voice broke. "That night when I struggled with Kate over the morphine bottle, the chain must have broken. I didn't even notice until days later. Finding it gone felt like losing Eliza all over again." What could I have said? Chen's composure cracked. That I was there. That I struggled with her moments before she died. I would have been arrested immediately, and Kate would still be dead. Nothing I said could change that. "You could have told the truth." "The truth." Chen laughed, bitter and broken. "The truth is that your wife begged me to help her die. She came to me because she knew I had helped someone else years before. She knew I understood mercy killing, and she wanted me to either give her the courage to drink that morphine or to give her a faster method. Something certain." Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. "Eliza Cross." Chen nodded. "Dr. Cross's wife. She was dying of consumption, drowning in her own lungs. The morphine eased the pain but couldn't stop the suffocation. She begged her husband to help her, but he couldn't. The weight of it would have destroyed him. So I did it instead." "How?" The question came from Cal, flat and cold. "I increased her morphine dose while she slept. A pillow over her face for just a few minutes to ensure she didn't wake in panic. It was gentle, peaceful. She went from sleep to death without suffering." Chen's voice was matter of fact, a nurse reciting a procedure. "Isaiah found her in the morning. He knew what I'd done, knew and was grateful. He wrote the death certificate as natural causes, and Eliza was buried with the town's sympathy rather than its judgment." "And Kate knew this," Clara said. "Kate figured it out. She was observant, and she noticed how peaceful Eliza looked in death compared to other consumption victims she'd seen. She came to me 3 months before she died and asked if I would do the same for her when the time came." "What did you tell her?" Chen's face was anguished. "I told her no. I couldn't do it again. The guilt had nearly destroyed me. I saw Eliza's face every night when I closed my eyes. I heard the sound of her last breath. I couldn't carry another death, even a merciful one." "So she planned to do it herself," Cal said. "Yes, she asked Dr. Cross for morphine, told him it was for pain. He gave her enough to end things if she chose. But Kate was afraid. Afraid of the pain if she miscalculated the dose. Afraid of Iris finding her. Afraid of failing and being left worse than before." Chen pulled out a handkerchief, wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "That night I saw her leave her house. I knew what she was planning. I followed her thinking I could talk her out of it. Convince her to let nature take its course or to tell Cal the truth and die with her family around her. But when I found her at the cliff, she was already holding the morphine, already preparing to drink it." "And you tried to stop her," Clara said. "I tried to take the bottle. I told her suicide was a sin, that Iris needed her, that dying alone in the cold was cowardice. I said terrible things, things I didn't mean but thought might shock her into changing her mind." Chen's voice broke. "She said the most terrible thing was forcing someone to live in agony when they'd chosen to leave. She said I'd helped Eliza because I loved her, but I wouldn't help Kate because I loved myself more, loved my clear conscience more than her suffering." "Was she right?" Cal asked. Chen looked at him directly. "Yes, she was absolutely right. I was a coward. I chose my own peace over hers. And in trying to save her from herself, I caused the very death I was trying to prevent." Silence settled over the kitchen. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft and relentless, covering the world in forgetfulness. but inside the truth sat raw and bleeding among them. Iris wrote on her slate, "Are you going to tell the sheriff?" Cal stared at the girl, then at Mrs. Chen. "She killed your mother. Even if it was an accident, she caused Kate's death. And then she hid it. Let us suffer without answers." But Iris was already writing. Mama wanted to die. Mrs. Chen tried to stop her. "If anyone is guilty, it's the disease, the consumption that was killing Mama slowly." Mrs. Chen just made it happen faster. "That's not justice," Cal said. Iris's response was swift and fierce. Mama didn't want justice. She wanted peace. Mrs. Chen tried to give her something different, and it went wrong, but Mama still got what she wanted in the end. She's not suffering anymore. Clara watched this exchange, this impossible wisdom coming from a child who had witnessed violence and somehow found her way to mercy. She thought about the old man in Philadelphia, about his family who had called for her arrest, about the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of compassion. "What do you want me to do?" Cal asked Iris. The girl wrote carefully, each word considered. "I want you to forgive Mrs. Chen. I want us to tell the truth about Mama's illness and her choice. I want people to know she was brave, not broken. And I want to stop pretending that Miss Clara is Mama. She's not. She's Clara. And that's enough." Cal looked at Clara. "You told her." "She knew from the beginning," Clara said. "Children see more clearly than we give them credit for." "So what now?" Cal's voice was tired, defeated. "We've solved the mystery. We know Kate wanted to die and Chen accidentally helped her do it. We know I brought a stranger into my home to play my dead wife. What happens when the town learns the truth? That depends," Mrs. Chen said quietly, "on what truth you choose to tell." Before Cal could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Sheriff Whitlock stood on the porch, his face grim. Behind him, Dr. Cross waited, looking uncomfortable. "We need to talk," Whitlock said. "All of us. About what really happened the night Kate Mercer died." They gathered in the parlor, an unlikely assembly of guilt and grief. The sheriff took the chair nearest the fire, but Cross remained standing, his doctor's bag clutched like a shield. "I've been doing some thinking," Whitlock said, "about inconsistencies in my investigation, about why I closed the case so quickly, and I've come to realize I was pushed to reach certain conclusions by certain people who had reasons to hide the truth." He looked at Cross. "You told me Kate Mercer died from injuries sustained in a fall, but you didn't mention the consumption, didn't mention that she was already dying. Why?" Cross set down his bag slowly. "Because I thought it was kinder to let her be remembered as a woman who died tragically rather than a woman who was dying slowly. The consumption diagnosis would have raised questions. People would have wondered if she jumped, if her death was suicide rather than accident." "And was it?" Whitlock asked. "Suicide? I don't know," Cross said. "I wasn't there, but I gave her morphine enough to make that choice if she wanted to, and I suspect she did want to. The disease was progressing rapidly. She had perhaps weeks left, and those weeks would have been agony." Whitlock turned to Mrs. Chen. "You were seen in the forest that night. A witness reported a woman matching your description running from the area near the cliff shortly after Kate fell." Chen's face remained impassive. "Who was this witness?" "Nathan Burke. He was following Kate, worried about her state of mind. He saw you struggling with her, saw her fall, and then he ran like the coward he is instead of coming forward." "If Burke was there," Cal said, "why didn't he help? Why didn't he try to save Kate, or at least report what he saw?" "Because he knew Kate was carrying his child," Whitlock said flatly, "and he didn't want that fact to become public. Easier to let her death remain a mystery than to explain his relationship with a married woman." The revelation should have shocked them, but it settled over the room with the weight of inevitability. Of course Kate's child had been Burke's. Of course he had been too weak to claim his own offspring, even in death. "So what do you plan to do with this information?" Cal asked the sheriff. Whitlock was quiet for a long moment. "I've been sheriff of this town for 12 years. I've seen violence and theft and every kind of human weakness. And I've learned that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing." He stood moved to the window, looked out at the falling snow. Kate Mercer was dying. She chose to end her life before the disease could steal everything from her. Mrs. Chen tried to stop her, and in the struggle Kate fell. That makes it an accident, not murder. And I see no purpose in prosecuting an accident when the outcome would have been the same either way." "You're going to cover it up," Cal said. "I'm going to write a report that states the facts as I understand them. Kate Mercer died from a fall while suffering from advanced consumption. The fall was likely accidental, possibly intentional, but ultimately the result of a disease that would have killed her within weeks. No charges will be filed." Cross exhaled slowly, relief evident in the release of tension from his shoulders, but Mrs. Chen remained rigid. "I don't want mercy I haven't earned," she said. "I killed a woman. Even if it was an accident, even if she wanted to die, I should face consequences." "The consequences," Whitlock said, "are that you'll live with what you did, that you'll see Kate's face every time you close your eyes, that you'll wonder for the rest of your life if you could have done something different. That's punishment enough." He turned to Clara. "As for you, Miss Ashford, I know you're not Kate Mercer. I've known since the moment you arrived. But you came here for your own reasons, and those reasons are your business. If you choose to stay in Bitterroot, you're welcome as yourself, not as a ghost." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Permission to stop performing. Permission to simply be. "And if I choose to leave, then you leave with my thanks for helping bring truth to light, even if that truth is complicated." After the sheriff and doctor departed, the four who remained sat in heavy silence. Cal stared at the fire. Mrs. Chen twisted her handkerchief into knots. Iris drew aimless patterns on her slate, and Clara wondered what came next. It was Iris who broke the silence. She set down her slate, took a breath, and spoke aloud for the first time since her mother's death. "I forgive you, Mrs. Chen." The words were rusty, underused, but clear. "Mama would want me to." Chen began to weep in earnest, then great shaking sobs that seemed to tear free from some deep place. Iris crossed to her small arms, wrapping around the woman's waist, and Chen held her like a lifeline. Cal watched them, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, moved to the window. "I can't forgive you," he said without turning. "Not yet, maybe not ever. But I understand why you did what you did. And I understand that Kate's death was Kate's choice as much as anyone's." He looked at Clara. "What about you? What do you choose?" Clara thought about Philadelphia, about the trial that awaited her if she returned, about the patient's family who wanted her blood for showing mercy their patriarch had begged for, about the life she'd fled and the life she'd found here in Montana's frozen wilderness. "I choose truth," she said. "I won't be Kate anymore. I won't wear her clothes or sleep in her bed or pretend to be something I'm not. But I'd like to stay if you'll have me, as Clara, as myself." "And what would you do here as yourself?" "Teach Iris. Help around the house and the mining claim. Perhaps offer medical assistance to those who need it and can't afford Dr. Cross's fees." Cal studied her. "Not as my wife." "No, as your partner, your friend. Someone who understands what you've lost because she's lost similar things." "People will talk. People always talk. The question is whether we care what they say." A smile ghosted across Cal's face, there and gone. "I suppose I'm past caring about propriety? My dead wife planned her own death and arranged for her replacement. My daughter witnessed a killing and kept silent for 18 months. And I hired a fugitive nurse to impersonate a ghost. We're well beyond the bounds of respectability." "Then we agree," Clara said. "I stay as myself. We tell people that Kate's friend came to help care for Iris after learning of Kate's death. No more lies about miraculous returns from the dead." Iris released Mrs. Chen came to stand between Clara and her father. She took both their hands, small fingers linking them together. "Family," she said. The single word carrying the weight of redefinition. Not the family they'd been born into or the family society expected, but the family they chose. The family built from shared grief and complicated mercy, and the decision to move forward despite carrying the weight of the dead. That evening, after Mrs. Chen had gone home and Iris had finally fallen asleep, Clara and Cal sat on the porch despite the cold. The snow had stopped, and stars emerged in a sky so vast it seemed impossible that human problems could matter beneath such immensity. "Tell me about the patient," Cal said. "The one you helped to die." Clara pulled her coat tighter. "His name was Thomas Whitfield, 73 years old, cancer throughout his abdomen. The doctor said he had perhaps 2 months left, but those months would be excruciating. He begged for morphine, but the hospital would only provide minimal doses, said anything more would be inappropriate. So you gave him more? I gave him peace. I sat with him one night when his family had gone home. I told him I understood his suffering. I asked if he was certain about his choice. And when he said yes, when he gripped my hand and thanked me through his tears, I gave him enough morphine to let him slip away. And his family. They arrived the next morning to find him dead. I'd made it look natural, like his heart had simply given out during the night. But his daughter suspected. She'd seen the morphine bottle, noticed it was emptier than it should have been. She demanded an investigation. Clara's voice remained steady, but her hands shook in her lap. The hospital found irregularities in the medication logs. My name appeared too often on the night shift. Other families came forward, said their loved ones had died peacefully under my care when they should have suffered longer. The authorities called it a pattern, evidence of serial euthanasia. How many? Cal asked quietly. 5 over the course of 2 years. All terminal patients, all in agony, all begging for release. I gave them what the doctors and the law refused to provide. And you'd do it again. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. In a heartbeat, I became a nurse to ease suffering. Sometimes that means healing. Sometimes it means helping someone find a gentler exit than disease allows. Cal was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than judgmental. Kate would have liked you, the real you, not the performance. She believed in mercy over dogma, in choice over obligation. That's why she left you the letter. Why she arranged for you to come here. Do you think she knew, Clara asked, that Mrs. Chen would be at the cliff that night, that her plan would fail? I think Kate understood that plans fail, that control is an illusion, but she tried anyway because trying was better than passive surrender. Cal looked at Clara. You're alike in that way, both willing to cross lines others fear, both carrying the weight of deaths you caused out of compassion. Does that make us monsters or martyrs? Neither. It makes you human, complicated and flawed, and trying to do right in a world that punishes mercy. They sat in silence as the temperature dropped and their breath turned to frost. Somewhere in the forest, an animal called out lonely and wild. The sound echoed across the frozen landscape, a reminder that survival required adaptation, and that gentleness often meant choosing when to fight and when to let go. 1 week later, Clara stood in the general store while Mrs. Chen wrapped purchases in brown paper. The townspeople had learned the truth by then, or a version of it. Kate Mercer had died of consumption and a fall. Her friend Clara had come west to help care for the orphaned child. The details varied depending on who told the story, but the essential facts remained consistent. Some people avoided Clara's eyes, uncomfortable with her presence. Others nodded in greeting, accepting her as part of Bitterroot's strange tapestry. And a few, very few, thanked her quietly for staying when she could have run. Dr. Cross entered the store, nodded to Clara with something approaching respect. I heard you've been treating the Morrison boy's fever. His mother says you saved his life. I gave him willow bark tea and kept him cool. The fever broke on its own. Still, she's grateful, as am I. The town needs medical help beyond what one physician can provide. He paused. If you're interested, I could use an assistant, someone with your training and your understanding of when to heal and when to simply comfort. Clara studied him, saw in his eyes a mirror of her own guilt and determination. I'd like that. After Cross left, Mrs. Chen handed Clara her wrapped packages. He's a good man, haunted, but good. Aren't we all haunted, some more than others? Chen's expression was somber. I dream of her, you know, of Kate. She stands at the cliff's edge and asks me the same question every night. Why did you try to stop me? And I never have a good answer. Maybe there isn't a good answer. Maybe you did what you thought was right in the moment, and it went wrong, and now you carry it. Is that enough to simply carry it? Clara thought about Thomas Whitfield's daughter, about the fury in her eyes as she demanded justice for a mercy killing, about the weight Clara carried from 5 deaths that had each seemed right at the time, but left scars nonetheless. It has to be enough, because the alternative is drowning in guilt that serves no one. A month passed, then another. Winter began its slow retreat, though snow still crowned the mountains and ice still glazed the streams. Iris returned to speaking, her voice growing stronger each day. She called Clara by name now, not Mama, but the distinction felt right rather than painful. Cal's mining claim showed promising signs of silver enough to ensure financial stability through the coming year. He worked the claim 6 days a week, returning home each evening to meals Clara prepared and lessons Iris recited. They settled into rhythms that felt almost normal, almost like family, almost like healing. But Clara knew healing was never linear, knew that some wounds stayed open, some guilt never fully absolved. She accepted this, found strange peace in the acceptance. One evening in early spring, as the first green shoots pushed through thawing ground, a stranger arrived in Bitterroot. A man in a fine suit carrying papers and asking questions about a woman named Clarabelle Ashford. Sheriff Whitlock came to the house that night. "There's a detective from Philadelphia staying at the boarding house. He's asking about you. Says there's still a warrant for your arrest back east." Clara felt her stomach clench. "Did you tell him I'm here?" "I told him no one by that name lives in Bitterroot, but he's persistent. Says he tracked you through telegraph records and witness statements. He knows you came west. It's only a matter of time before he puts together that you and Clara Mercer are the same person." Cal set down his coffee cup with careful control. What are our options? She could run again, head further west or north into Canada, or she could stay and face whatever comes. Clara looked at Iris, who watched the adults with solemn eyes, looked at Cal, whose face showed concern rather than judgment, looked at this life she'd built from the ruins of Kate's careful planning. "I'm tired of running," she said. "If he wants to take me back to Philadelphia for trial, I'll go, but I won't pretend anymore. Won't hide who I am or what I did." "They'll convict you," Whitlock said. "The evidence is strong. You'll go to prison." "Then I'll go to prison, but at least I'll go as myself." But Iris stood suddenly, her small face fierce. "No, I won't let them take you." "Sweetheart," Clara began. "You helped people," Iris said, her voice ringing clear. "You helped them stop hurting. That's not a crime. That's being good. The law doesn't always agree with what's good. Then the law is wrong." Iris crossed to Clara, took her hand. "Mama chose to die because she was suffering. You helped other people make the same choice. And now you're here helping me. If they take you away, they're punishing goodness. And I won't let that happen." Cal looked at his daughter, pride and pain mingling in his expression. "What do you suggest? We fight, all of us. We tell everyone what Miss Clara did and why. We make them understand." "That's not how justice works," Whitlock said gently. "Then maybe," Iris said, "we need different justice." The detective came to the house the next morning. He was younger than Clara expected, perhaps 30, with sharp eyes and a notebook filled with cramped writing. He introduced himself as James Carlyle, employed by the Whitfield family to bring Clarabelle Ashford to justice. "I know who you are," he said to Clara. "I've tracked you for 3 months, from Philadelphia to Chicago to Denver, and finally here. You're good at hiding, but not good enough." "I'm not hiding anymore," Clara said. "If you're here to arrest me, then do it." Carlyle pulled out papers, official-looking documents with seals and signatures. "Clarabelle Ashford, I'm authorized to take you into custody for the murder of Thomas Whitfield and 4 other patients at Philadelphia General Hospital. They weren't murders, they were mercy killings. The law doesn't recognize that distinction. Then the law is incomplete." They stood in the parlor, this detective from the east and this woman who'd tried to outrun her past. Around them gathered the small family she'd found, Cal solid and steady, Iris fierce despite her size, Sheriff Whitlock who'd followed Carlyle to the house, and Dr. Cross who'd heard of the confrontation and come to bear witness. "Before you take her," Cross said quietly, "you should know that Clara has been working as my medical assistant for the past 2 months. She's treated fevers, set broken bones, delivered a baby when the mother couldn't afford my fees. She saved lives here. That doesn't erase what she did in Philadelphia. No, but it provides context. Clara isn't a monster who kills indiscriminately. She's a healer who understands that sometimes healing means letting go." Carlyle's expression remained unmoved. "I'm not a judge or jury. I'm here to bring her back for trial. What happens after that is beyond my authority." "Then take me," Clara said. "But know that I don't regret what I did. I gave 5 people peace when no one else would. I'd do it again." "You're confessing. I'm stating facts." Carlyle moved to place her in restraints, but Iris stepped between them. "Wait." She ran from the room, returned moments later with her slate. On it she'd written frantically, "If you take her away for being merciful, then you have to take Mrs. Chen too, and Dr. Cross. And maybe me, because I'm glad Mama died fast instead of slow. We're all guilty of choosing mercy. Are you going to arrest everyone who thinks suffering should end when it becomes unbearable?" Carlyle read the slate, his expression flickering with something that might have been doubt. "What is she talking about?" Cross spoke carefully. "This town has seen its share of mercy deaths. My wife, Kate Mercer. Others whose names I won't share. In each case, someone made the decision to ease suffering rather than prolong it. If you take Clara, you'll open investigations into all of those deaths. You'll tear apart this community looking for crimes that most people here consider acts of compassion." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering perspective. The East has different rules than the frontier. Out here, we understand that sometimes kindness looks like helping someone die. If you can't accept that, then yes, you'll need to arrest half the town." Carlyle stood silent, clearly torn between duty and the uncomfortable truth of moral ambiguity. Finally he said, "I need to send a telegram. Consult with my employers. This situation is more complicated than I anticipated." He left, promising to return the next day with a decision. Clara spent that night unable to sleep, knowing her freedom hung by the thread of a detective's conscience and a family's desire for vengeance. But morning brought unexpected news. Sheriff Whitlock arrived at dawn, his expression grim. Carlyle left on the early train. Said his investigation turned up insufficient evidence to warrant extradition. "The case against you is closed." Clara felt her knees go weak. "Why, what changed?" "I may have had a conversation with him last night. Explained that if he took you away, certain information about his own family might become public. Information they'd prefer stayed buried. You blackmailed him. I applied pressure based on mutually beneficial discretion. The result is the same. You're free." Whitlock hesitated, then added, "One more thing. Nathan Burke left town yesterday, sold the silver vein to a businessman from Helena, and took the train east. Left a note saying some debts can't be paid in the place where they were incurred." Cal's expression was unreadable. "Good. Let him carry his guilt somewhere else." But Clara knew freedom was more complicated than legal status. She would always carry Thomas Whitfield's death, would always wonder if she'd done right or simply convinced herself that mercy justified the means. That evening, as spring rain washed the last snow from the ground, Clara sat with Cal and Iris on the porch. They watched water fall on thawing earth, washing away winter's remnants and preparing the ground for new growth. "What will you do now?" Cal asked. "Now that you're truly free to choose." Clara thought about it, about Philadelphia and the life she'd lost, about Kate and the legacy she'd left, about this strange family assembled from grief and guilt and the decision to keep moving forward. "I'll stay," she said, "not as Kate's replacement, not as anyone but myself. I'll help Dr. Cross. I'll teach Iris. I'll be your friend and partner in this complicated life we're building. No more running. No more running. Whatever comes, I'll face it here." Iris leaned against Clara's side, warm and solid and alive. "Good, because you belong with us now." And perhaps she did. Perhaps belonging wasn't about blood or law or social acceptability. Perhaps it was about choosing to stay when running would be easier, about facing consequences and carrying guilt, and still deciding that mercy mattered more than judgment. The rain fell harder, washing the world clean, but Clara knew some stains never fully washed away. Some choices marked you permanently. The question wasn't whether you could erase them, but whether you could carry them with grace and still find reasons to wake each morning and try again. She would carry Thomas Whitfield always, and Eliza Cross, and Kate Mercer, and all the others who'd died because someone chose to ease their suffering rather than prolong their agony. She would carry them, and she would continue the work. Not in hospitals where regulations and judgment constrained compassion, but here in this wild place where people understood that sometimes love meant knowing when to let go. The rain continued. The family sat together, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like applause from the mountains, acknowledging the storm that had passed and the clearing that would follow. Not perfect, not pure, but alive. And for now, for this moment, that was enough.